There was a time when opening the pantry or freezer could reveal foods that once felt completely ordinary, yet now seem almost impossible to imagine on a family dinner table. Some arrived in cans, some came frozen in cardboard boxes, and others began as powders, packets, or strange little kitchen experiments. They promised convenience, novelty, economy, or simply a way to make an ordinary Tuesday night feel a little more special. For millions of American families, these foods became part of the rhythm of home. The stove heating, cans opening, dishes passing, and dessert waiting in the refrigerator. Many were not culinary masterpieces, and some would look downright peculiar to modern eyes. But that was never the whole point. Their real flavor came from the kitchens, people, routines, and moments surrounding them. Here are 15 foods and dinner table traditions that once felt familiar in American homes, but gradually lost the place they once held. 1. Chun King canned chow mein. For many mid-century families, Chinese food at home did not begin with a delivery app, a paper carton, or even a neighborhood restaurant. It could begin with cans from Chun King, the company built by entrepreneur Geno Paolucci around an Americanized version of Chinese-style convenience food. The packaging itself became part of the memory, especially the unusual stacked can presentation associated with the brand. Opening dinner meant dealing with cans, vegetables, sauce, and the crunchy chow mein noodles that completed the meal. To a suburban family in the 1950s or 1960s, the whole experience could feel surprisingly adventurous. This was not traditional Chinese cooking, and it should not be remembered as such. It was distinctly American convenience food, designed to bring unfamiliar flavors into kitchens where canned soup and meatloaf were already comfortable territory. The contrast mattered. Soft vegetables and thick savory sauce met the brittle crunch of those noodles. Families could spoon the mixture into serving bowls and turn an ordinary weeknight into something advertised as a taste of faraway dining. As Chinese restaurants became more accessible and American tastes broadened, this canned approximation no longer seemed nearly as exotic. The Chun King name changed hands, product lines changed, and the old dinner ritual gradually faded with them. But for people who remember those cans, the sound of the opener and that first crunchy bite can still unlock an entire kitchen. 2. Banquet Cookin Bags. Long before microwaves became standard kitchen equipment, convenience still had to work with boiling water, stovetops, and a little patience. Banquet Cookin Bags offered one memorable solution: frozen entrees sealed inside pouches that were heated in a pot of boiling water. There might be sliced beef in gravy, turkey in gravy, or another inexpensive entree intended to make supper easier. The preparation created its own small kitchen ritual. A pouch disappeared beneath bubbling water, while potatoes, vegetables, bread, or another simple side waited nearby. Then came the careful retrieval with tongs, followed by the moment when the hot bag was opened and its gravy poured out. That gravy could transform toast or mashed potatoes into something that felt much more substantial. For busy households, the appeal was obvious. There was no roast to prepare, no large pan to scrub, and far less work between arriving home and putting something hot on the table. The meal still required a stove, however, which makes the memory very different from today's push-button convenience. Steam, scissors, metal tongs, and a dangerously hot pouch were all part of the process. As microwave meals improved and frozen entrees moved into trays designed for faster heating, boil-and-bag dinners lost much of their reason to exist. What disappeared was not just a product, but a peculiar stage in America's long search for the fastest possible family supper. 3. Jell-O 1, 2, 3. In 1969, General Foods introduced a dessert that seemed to perform a small magic trick inside the refrigerator. Jell-O 1, 2, 3 began as one mixture, but after preparation, it's separated into 3 visibly different layers. There was gelatin below, a softer middle layer, and a light foamy layer on top. For children watching through the refrigerator door, the transformation could seem much more impressive than the simple preparation suggested. Clear glasses made the effect even better, because all 3 layers could be seen before the first spoonful was taken. This was exactly the kind of package novelty that fit comfortably into the late 1960s and 1970s kitchen. Convenience mattered, but so did the sense that modern food companies could make ordinary home cooking feel futuristic. Jell-O already had a powerful place in American family meals, from fruit-filled molds to salads and desserts. Jell-O 1-2-3 turned that familiarity into a trick children could anticipate after dinner. It survived well beyond the 1970s, so this was not a product that vanished at the end of the decade. But eventually, it disappeared from store shelves, leaving generations of former children wondering why something so memorable was gone. Today, homemade recipes try to reproduce the effect. For many people, however, the imitation cannot quite reproduce the excitement of seeing those 3 layers waiting after supper. 4. Savory gelatin ring salads. Few foods announce mid-century dinner table as dramatically as a trembling ring of savory gelatin surrounded by lettuce. Tomato aspic, vegetable gelatin, and molded salads once occupied a place that can be difficult for younger diners to understand. Gelatin was not reserved only for sweet dessert. It could suspend celery, peppers, olives, vegetables, or other ingredients inside a glossy molded centerpiece. Some versions were served with mayonnaise or dressing, placed neatly in the open center of the ring. The result was part side dish and part table decoration. Molded foods also carried a certain sense of effort and presentation. A successful unmolding could turn inexpensive ingredients into something that looked carefully engineered for company, Sunday dinner, or a potluck. Cookbooks and food advertising helped encourage endless variations. By the post-war years, refrigerators made chilled dishes easy to prepare in more homes, and molded salads fit the era's enthusiasm for convenience and presentation. But tastes changed. Fresh salads became more desirable, international foods became more familiar, and the sight of vegetables trapped in savory gelatin stopped signaling modern sophistication. By the late 20th century, many of these molds had retreated from ordinary family meals. Aspic never vanished completely, and versions survive in particular traditions. What largely disappeared was the expectation that a shimmering gelatin ring belonged beside the meat and potatoes. 5. Campbell's Scotch broth and pepper pot soup. The familiar red and white Campbell's can once represented a much wider world of soup flavors than many supermarket shoppers see today. Among the varieties remembered from earlier decades were Scotch broth and pepper pot. Scotch broth brought together ingredients associated with a hearty barley-based soup tradition, while pepper pot carried the name of a much older Philadelphia dish. Neither began as a Campbell's invention. What the company did was make such flavors available in the convenient condensed form that generations knew so well. Opening a can, adding the required liquid, and warming soup on the stove could create lunch or a light supper with very little effort. Saltine crackers nearby completed the scene in countless kitchens. The interesting part is how ordinary these cans could once seem. They sat within a pantry culture in which shelf-stable soup was expected to solve meals quickly and economically. Over time, consumer preferences shifted, and product lines were adjusted. Some once familiar varieties were retired, while enduring favorites such as tomato and chicken noodle remained. That makes the old cans unusually powerful nostalgia objects. People may not remember every spoonful, but they remember seeing a particular label repeatedly in a parent's or grandparent's cupboard. Sometimes, a vanished dinner memory is no larger than the empty space where one red and white can used to be. 6. Franco-American canned macaroni and cheese. Before macaroni and cheese became inseparable from the image of a dry pasta box and a packet of powdered cheese, canned versions had their own audience. Franco-American sold prepared pasta products that could be heated with almost no cooking skill at all. Its canned macaroni and cheese was soft, saucy, and very different from the firmer baked or boxed versions many people prefer today. That texture was part of the convenience. There was no pasta water to drain and no cheese sauce to build from scratch. The can opener did most of the difficult work. Once heated, the macaroni could appear beside meat, vegetables, or another simple entree as a fast, filling side. For children, its softness and mild processed cheese flavor could be part of the appeal. For parents, the shelf life and speed mattered just as much. American convenience food kept evolving, however. Boxed macaroni and cheese became deeply entrenched, frozen foods multiplied, and expectations about texture changed. The Franco-American name itself eventually disappeared as Campbell reorganized the brand. Canned pasta certainly did not disappear with it. But this particular style of canned macaroni and cheese lost the familiar place it once held. To anyone raised on it, the memory is less about gourmet cheese than about a saucepan, an opened can, and dinner being ready almost immediately. 7. Frozen cream pies. A cream pie once had an easy shortcut that required neither rolling dough nor whipping a filling from scratch. Frozen pies, from brands such as Morton and Banquet, brought chocolate, banana, coconut, lemon, and other familiar flavors into supermarket freezer cases. The thin aluminum pie tin was part of the experience. So was the cardboard box pulled from the freezer hours before dessert. For a family that wanted something sweet after dinner without an afternoon of baking, the arrangement made perfect sense. The pie could thaw while the rest of the meal was prepared and eaten. Then it appeared at the table, looking far more festive than the amount of work involved. Chocolate filling, whipped topping, or a pale cream center made an ordinary weeknight feel closer to a restaurant dessert. These pies also belonged to an era when the frozen food aisle itself still carried a sense of modern convenience. Freezers were changing what families could keep on hand and how quickly a meal could come together. Frozen desserts remain abundant today, of course, but many specific inexpensive cream pies and brands that older shoppers remember no longer dominate freezer cases in the same way. The old experience was wonderfully uncomplicated. Take out the box, wait, slice the pie, and suddenly Tuesday night had dessert. 8. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Creamed chipped beef had roots far older than the suburban kitchens of the 1950s, including a strong association with American military mess halls. But the dish also found a long civilian life at home. Thin pieces of dried beef were combined with a simple white sauce and spooned generously over toast. Jarred dried beef made the meal especially practical. Flour, fat, milk, pepper, toast, and preserved meat could become a filling supper without requiring an expensive cut of fresh meat. The appearance was humble and unmistakable. Pale gravy covered crisp toast, while reddish strips of beef showed through the sauce. Families had their own preferences for thickness, seasoning, and how much toast should disappear beneath the gravy. Its military nickname, often shortened politely to SOS, followed the dish into civilian conversation. Yet reducing it to a military joke misses why it endured. It was warm, inexpensive, familiar, and made from ingredients that could be kept around. Those qualities mattered to households watching grocery budgets. Creamed chipped beef can still be found, and dried beef is still sold. But it no longer occupies the same broad cultural space as a routine family supper. For those who grew up with it, one plate can recall a kind of practical home cooking that rarely worried about being fashionable. 9. Hunt's Skillet Dinners. The skillet dinner promised something irresistible to a busy household. Turn a pound of ground beef into enough food for the family. Hunt's was among the companies selling boxed skillet meal solutions during the convenience food boom. The idea fit perfectly into the changing American kitchen. Brown the hamburger, add the packaged components, stir everything together, and let one pan do most of the work. Pasta, sauce, seasoning, and beef became a complete-looking dinner without a long list of ingredients. This was the same broad era in which Hamburger Helper became a household name. Hunt's products belonged to a larger competition to make ground beef stretch farther while reducing preparation and cleanup. The electric skillet could make the concept even more appealing. Set on a countertop or table, it became one of the era's recognizable tools for casseroles, fried foods, and one-pan meals. A skillet full of bubbling beef and pasta was not glamorous restaurant cooking. That was exactly why it worked. It addressed the everyday question of what to feed several people quickly after work, school, errands, and household chores. Some brands in this category survived and became icons. Others faded away. Hunt's skillet meals are now part of that less remembered side of the convenience food race. The box may be gone, but the basic promise behind it still fills supermarket aisles today. 10. Bird's Eye International-Style Frozen Vegetables. Frozen vegetables did not always arrive in a microwavable bag designed to steam itself. In the 1960s and 1970s, companies searched for ways to make vegetables seem more exciting than a plain pile of peas. Bird's Eye offered flavored vegetable combinations that borrowed international-sounding names and sauces to give the side dish a little glamour. For a suburban shopper, the appeal was not necessarily authenticity. It was novelty without difficulty. A frozen package could turn familiar vegetables into something advertised as more sophisticated, while requiring only a skillet and a few minutes of attention. Sauce melted around the vegetables as they heated. The finished dish could sit beside chicken, pork chops, or another familiar American entree, and make the plate seem less routine. This was international flavor filtered through the convenience food imagination of its time. That distinction matters. These products reflected what mainstream American food companies believed foreign sophistication should taste like to their customers. As frozen food technology and consumer tastes changed, specific combinations and product lines came and went. Today's freezer aisle still sells countless seasoned vegetables. What disappeared were many of those particular names, packages, sauces, and promises of instant continental elegance. For some families, even vegetables once arrived with a tiny sense of adventure. 11. Pillsbury Bundt cake mixes and the tunnel of fudge craze. In 1966, a cake helped transform the Bundt pan from an unusual kitchen object into a national obsession. Ella Helfrich's tunnel of fudge cake became a celebrated Pillsbury Bake-Off winner and sent home bakers searching for the distinctive fluted pan. The cake's dramatic center was the attraction. Cutting a slice revealed a rich, soft chocolate interior surrounded by the sculpted shape of the bundt. Soon, the pan became a familiar sight at dinner parties, church gatherings, holidays, and Sunday suppers. Food companies naturally followed the craze with mixes and products aimed at making impressive cakes easier for home bakers. The broader bundt boom perfectly captured the era's combination of convenience and presentation. A homemaker could begin with packaged ingredients, yet still place something theatrical at the center of the dessert table. The heavy metal pan did much of the visual work. Its ridges made even a simple cake look formal enough for company. Bundt cakes certainly have not disappeared. Neither has the tunnel of fudge recipe. What faded were many of the specific mixes, kits, and intense product crazes surrounding them in the 1970s. For people who remember those years, the pan itself can be enough to bring back coffee, conversation, and a cake carrier waiting on the kitchen counter. 12. Canned whole chicken. Some forgotten foods seem ordinary until the can is opened. A whole canned chicken belongs in a different category. Brands such as Sweet Sue sold large cans containing an entire cooked chicken preserved with broth inside. When chilled, the broth could become gelatinous, creating an appearance that modern viewers often find startling. But treating the product only as a joke misses the reason it existed. Shelf stability was valuable. A pantry-ready chicken could be kept without depending on a fresh bird waiting in the refrigerator. The meat could then be used for dishes such as chicken and dumplings, casseroles, soups, or other family meals. Opening the large metal can was only the beginning. The chicken and its broth still had to be turned into something appetizing at the stove or dinner table. For households accustomed to canned meats, the idea was less bizarre than it appears through modern eyes. Food preservation has always reflected the technology and priorities of its moment. As refrigeration, distribution, supermarkets, and inexpensive fresh or frozen poultry became more convenient, canned whole chicken became far less central to ordinary shopping. Versions have not vanished completely, but the sight of a full chicken emerging from a pantry can now feel like a message from another food era. 13. Glazed Spam and luncheon meat dinner loaves. Spam is still very much alive. What has largely disappeared from many American dinner tables is one of the elaborate ways it was once presented as a family entree. Mid-century recipes frequently transformed canned luncheon meat into something meant to look festive. The loaf could be scored in a diamond pattern and decorated with cloves. Pineapple, brown sugar, cherries, or a sweet glaze could turn the rectangular block into a miniature imitation of a holiday ham. The presentation seems almost theatrical today. At the time, it made practical sense within a culture that enthusiastically promoted canned foods and decorative recipe ideas. A shelf-stable meat could be dressed up with pantry ingredients and carried to the table as a recognizable centerpiece. This was not necessarily a meal of desperation. Advertising and magazines often presented convenience foods as modern, clever, and respectable. The cook's creativity came from what happened after the can was opened. Fresh meat became easier and more varied for many households, and ideas about convenience changed. Spam itself survived, developing strong regional and cultural followings. But the clove-studded pineapple-decorated dinner loaf became a much rarer sight. The product remained. The ritual around it disappeared. 14. Chef Boyardee pizza kits. Before pizza delivery became an effortless phone call in towns across America, making pizza at home could feel like an event. Chef Boyardee boxed pizza kits offered families a shortcut. The package supplied key components for dough, sauce, and cheese, leaving the family to assemble the pizza in the kitchen. That assembly was half the attraction. Children could help press dough across a metal pan. Sauce was spread toward the edges with a spoon. The cheese went over the top, along with whatever extra toppings the household happened to have. Then, everyone waited while the smell of baking pizza filled the kitchen. The result was not the same as a neighborhood pizzeria pie. It did not need to be. The kit turned dinner into an activity, particularly on weekends when children could participate. It also belongs to a time before national delivery chains and frozen pizzas offered today's enormous range of choices. Pizza kits did not vanish entirely, and versions of the Chef Boyardee product have continued in changing forms. What faded was their old position as one of the most exciting ways to bring pizza night into the family kitchen. For many former children, the memory is as much about floury fingers and uneven dough as it is about the final slice. 15. Tang Russian Friendship Tea. Tang is remembered first as an orange breakfast drink, and famously through its association with America's space-age imagination. But in many households, another Tang tradition appeared on handwritten cards and in community cookbooks. Russian Friendship Tea was a homemade dry mixture often combining tang with instant tea, spices, and other powdered ingredients. Recipes varied from family to family. Cinnamon and cloves helped turn the bright orange drink into something warm and fragrant. A spoonful of the mixture could be stirred into hot water for an easy beverage during cold weather, holidays, gatherings, or evenings at home. The name did not describe a traditional Russian tea ceremony. It belonged to an American recipe tradition built around branded pantry ingredients and the pleasure of sharing homemade mixes. Jars of the powder could even become inexpensive gifts. That makes the drink a useful reminder that forgotten foods were not always manufactured as complete products. Sometimes companies supplied the ingredients, while home cooks invented the ritual. Tang still exists. Instant tea still exists. Spiced hot drinks certainly still exist. What has faded is the cultural moment when combining those particular powders felt clever enough to copy onto a recipe card and pass to a neighbor. And that may be the common thread connecting all 15 of these foods. They did not simply disappear because people suddenly decided they tasted bad. American kitchens changed around them. Microwaves replaced boiling pouches. Fresh and frozen choices expanded. Restaurant food became easier to bring home, and ideas about health and sophistication moved in new directions. Some products truly vanished, while others survived after losing the starring role they once held at supper. That distinction matters because nostalgia is rarely as simple as saying something is gone. Sometimes the food is still technically available, yet the world that made it feel ordinary has disappeared. A can, a foil pouch, a gelatin mold, or an aluminum pie tin can become a time capsule when it is tied to the right memory. And for anyone who sat at those tables, the strongest memory may not be the food at all. It may be the person who opened the can, stirred the skillet, sliced the pie, or called everyone into the kitchen when dinner was ready. Those are the things no supermarket can put back on the shelf.